I'm Robert Moynihan, the editor of Inside the Vatican magazine, with Don Carlos Murr, a priest living in Andalusia in Spain, and we have a weekly podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 20th, 2025, and we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, to speak of matters concerning the Catholic Church, our world today, the fate of humanity, and the problems and controversies facing the Church, in particularly the leadership of the Church in Rome. Welcome, Father Murr.
Thank you very much, Robert. How are you doing?
I'm doing
You
well,
look chipper.
Father. Well, thank you. We are all getting older, and I find myself a little less clear in my memory on certain points, like the ordination.
Is that a fact? Is that a fact? Tell me all about it.
I used to remember the election and ordination and consecration dates of the popes, and even back all through the 20th century. And sometimes I have some fuzziness now, and I have to check it on the internet.
It's like my dear old grandmother used to say, Robert. She said, "I have a fantastic memory. It's just very short."
So we are facing a number of questions, but you first wanted to say something about your own position there.
Oh, yes, if you just for maybe 1 minute, less than that. I sent out a newsletter to all of the subscribers that I have to my website, which is down on the screen, www.charlesmurr.com. I sent out a newsletter, and I think the way it was sent out, most of it went automatically to spam in people's spam account. But they haven't seen it. Would you please check your spam? It's an important newsletter. All right? That's all I had to say. That's my announcement.
Okay, people should check their spam folder in their
it might have gone to spam rather than directly to their inbox.
Yeah, and you have a residence, Monte Cristo, the mountain of Christ.
That might have thrown it off because the name of the hacienda is Monte Cristo, and maybe it didn't read or recognize that. But anyway, that's what it is. It's for Monte Cristo. We're turning this into what it always was meant to be, a retreat house, which we've already started with you all. It's great, and looking forward to you being here in October again.
That's correct. We plan to visit you with 20 or 25 pilgrims. We spent several days with you.
Great people, a great experience. Oh, beautiful.
Right. And so we're going to have in a few minutes a little video about that experience with you, Father. And we have people watching us, nearly 100 people right now, but they generally tend to join throughout the broadcast to become several hundred. And I'll just read a couple. Rosie 2020 says, "Hello, Father Murr and Robert. Greetings from Abergavenny in South Wales."
Beautiful.
Jeff Lewis, good morning. All good here in Lafayette, Louisiana. Honeybee, good to hear Father Murr sounding well. And Kennedy,
and Father Murr feels much better too. Also, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Father. I suppose we start with that fact that in the flesh we will have suffering and troubles, and we are mortal and we are fallible, and somehow we're engaged in a pilgrimage toward a final perfect, we call it even theosis, a divinization in the Eastern tradition, that we have a soul that's going to somehow be in communion with God, be in full communion with Christ, and that this process is being worked out in the life of the Church and in each individual journey. And we said this was the key reason for the Church, the salvation of souls. And this is the center of everything. Right. And so we are co-pilgrims, and each of us has our difficulties, and we help each other.
And the real way to understand the path I know that this is not going to sound popular. The real way to the path into understanding it is called suffering. Just a little bit, enough suffering to get us serious about life. Now, we don't want to become too serious that we lose all humor, because that's also part of life. But we want a seriousness in life, because we are talking about the salvation of souls. We're talking about the salvation of our own souls. It's serious business. And the best way to get into that seriousness is through a little bit of suffering. When we suffer, we stop for a moment. When we recapitulate, we rethink things. We see life and situations and people in a different light, and it's a good light. It helps us meditate. Some of the most superficial people I have ever met in life are people who live in a bubble. I don't know how they've managed. I know people who have lived in a bubble for over 80 years, Robert. They've never really had a problem. Never. But neither do they have much depth. I don't mean that as a personal criticism of them. They weren't given the occasion to develop depth. You develop it through suffering and through a little bit of pain. You remember when you were a boy, I don't know, you're from kind of the Midwest too, right?
No, I grew up in Connecticut.
Oh, in Connecticut. Excuse me.
Well, in Italy, I have to always.
Connecticut was always Yale University and the arrival point. Anyway, but for us, less fortunate who grew up in Minnesota, actually wasn't much less fortunate because we had a great upbringing. But I used to wake up in the kind of the middle of the night. It was for me anyway as a kid, kind of whining a little bit, never crying, about pains in joints, especially I remember in knees and elbows.
Yeah.
And either my dad or my mom would come up to give a final check on all of us to make sure that we were falling asleep. And I would complain a little bit about it. And my dad always said, these are called growing pains. You ever hear that expression, growing pains? That made no sense to me, really, except he explained that you're growing taller, you're growing wider, you're growing, God knows he hit it on the wider sense when I got older. But you're growing, you're stretching, your body is growing, and because it's growing, it hurts. Hurting is part of growing. And I think that's in a nutshell. That's for a child's mentality, but that's the idea. You grow through suffering. You just do. And I sort of pity the people who, I pity the people who have never suffered because they're not there. They're not there yet.
Okay, I think that's an ancient maxim of all lovers of wisdom, that wisdom is acquired in part often through suffering. And
yeah, I believe that.
We've got several. I'd like to make this community feel connected. Sharon Subjak writes, "Greetings from Eagle, Wisconsin. These podcasts are the highlight of our Wednesdays, with prayers from Joe and Sharon Subjak."
Isn't Eagle, Wisconsin, where the Holy Hill is, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure of the name.
The Carmelite Monastery of Holy Hill, I believe so.
Yeah, it's a beautiful.
We had a retreat there one year, many years ago.
Curtis White says, greetings.
My memory isn't so great either, Robert.
Greetings from Northern Ireland. June Vendetti says, I'm from Connecticut, Robert. So June, yes, you and I both know that small nutmeg state. They're tucked in between New York and Boston. J. Kevin
Nutmeg
Vogel.
state, that's right.
J. Kevin Vogel, blessings to all from Northern Idaho. And I do this partly to show we do have people from all over the world in a few dozen.
Undoubtedly.
People. Yeah. Blue Bear writes, in heaven, I don't want to forget my suffering from earth. Will we remember it? And this is going to lead us into some further questions about the problems facing the church today and kind of what we're calling an unnecessary nightmare. But that's a pitch for what we're getting to a few minutes from now, but we'll lead into that. In heaven, I don't want to forget my suffering from earth. Will we remember it? I have some ideas, Father, but what do you think?
I don't think it's that you remember your suffering, because in heaven there isn't a suffering. There is not a suffering. It's over. It's finished. The suffering is getting to heaven. The suffering is the understanding, the road to getting to heaven. But when you get there, you're a different person. The person has already gone through that purification. This is the idea also for purgatory, Robert.
Yeah.
It's that final purgation, that final suffering, that final cleansing to get into heaven. But in heaven, there is no suffering. It doesn't belong there.
Okay.
You will arrive the way you are, in the maturity that you are. And we have to remember something else that our Lord said, sort of very subtly, but that in heaven there are many mansions. So there are different levels of heaven for different people. We're not all going to be on the same hallelujah cloud, in other words, but we'll be there. That's the most important thing. But you're going to be there to the extent that you've loved God on earth, in your life on earth, and we're loved by him. Love is different for every single human being ever brought into this world. It's different in every single case. It's magnificent, and we'll be in heaven the same way, loved by God, but to a great degree how much we loved him.
Yeah, I do think the concept that it's different, that it is not commensurate with what we know in space and in time, where we are groping, as it were. St. Paul speaks about groping to understand.
Yep.
And seeing as in a glass darkly, he says, or as in a mirror. It's not the thing itself. And God, where he is, we are going, and we are entering into his communion with him. And it's a German phrase that was mentioned to me years ago by a dear friend, ganz anders. Ganz means entirely, G-A-N-Z, ganz, entirely, totally. Anders, A-N-D-E-R-S. Anders is else or other, something else, entirely different, entirely other. And the idea that God is entirely other is a fundament of theology, therefore so different from us that we even cannot speak of him. There's a whole area of theology which argues we can say nothing about him because each word will be so far short of the reality that it's better to say nothing. Apophatic, they speak of the nature of our mind, and our speech is so limited to our human and temporal existence that we, out of reverence for God's otherness, we should respect and be silent. You know, there's even hymns that speak about let all tongues be silent.
Let all human flesh stay silent. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I think,
it's true. It's true, but at the same time, it's most humiliating, humbling, not humiliating, humbling, when we realize that Christ, who came as the ultimate revelation of God, spoke to us in terms, incredibly simple terms. God is everything more. God is everything more. But he spoke to us and he told us what we have to know. This is what they say when we talk about the church contains in her all necessary truth to get to heaven. It doesn't say that the church contains in herself all truth, because that only exists in God, all truth. But the church holds on to all of those truths that are necessary for our salvation. And this is what Christ came to teach us also. He came to sacrifice, give his life, and change our whole history, which is magnificent, and grant us heaven, salvation. But also he came to teach. But he taught in very simple ways the most complex ideas that are already in God. And we have to remember that. He spoke to us as children, and he called us children because we are.
You know, little
We
children.
never have to get too big for our britches. In other words,
Okay, so we've moved from the concept of suffering to the concept that we are moving towards God, that we are being saved from a separation from God, and that process is involved with the conforming of ourselves spiritually and then even physically to Christ. St. Paul says, "Not I live, but Christ." Now, a lot
yes.
of people are hesitant, and John Paul II repeatedly said, "Don't be afraid of this. Be afraid of Christ, but rejoice, because what the limitations we all realize in ourselves, even forgetfulness, but even selfishness, and even fixations, and these can be overcome. These can be Christified, turned into Christ. And this, in a sense, is the process of the church's life now for 2,000 years. And sometimes we forget this, but the essential point is the dignity that each of us has as a soul, which is infinite. And this is the source of what we call Christian humanism, or Christian respect for the human person, that enables Christianity to create a culture which is filled with beauty, filled with respect for the person, with music, with architecture, with liturgy, and with ceremonies. And all of this is in question now. We somehow have a crisis because the concept of moving toward God has been set aside and instead replaced by a concept that we, without God, will become gods and control reality and have scientific knowledge and artificial intelligence knowledge. And we will live in a world that will leave behind Christ himself as a kind of voice from 2,000 years ago, no longer relevant today. This is how I interpret the crisis we face today. It's a negation of Christ, it's antichrist, and it's affirmation of what is human, but it's affirming something so small and fallible and insignificant without God that it's a kind of ridiculous way of centering human effort and human destiny. And therefore, I pity the entire elite leadership of our society, and I reject their attempt to eliminate Christ from history and from our horizon.
That's interesting, Robert, because I see what you're saying, and I agree with it in great part. But I also see a world, thank God, a world beginning to change. I see a world walking away from wokeness, from relativity, from political correctness. I see a world rejecting that. I see a world walking back toward reality. Now, I might be wrong, but I'm seeing it politically. You're talking about the world, and that to me means the world of politics, the world of culture, the world independent to one degree or another of God. I see that world coming back to its senses in great part, not completely, but in great part, especially in the last 5 years or so, maybe even 10. I see that coming back, and it's wonderful to see. It's wonderful to start hearing young people speaking logically. It's wonderful to hear people of all ages speaking realistically, rejecting the unreal, and that's happening. Now, it's going to be a while for that to come into play completely, because it took a while to get there. It took a long time for people to become unreal. Right? But I see that happening in the world. What I see happening In the church, it's something else. Not completely different from that, but something else. I'm going to put it just as simply as I can. And I'm a simple man, basically. I see a problem with a heresy that was called the heresy of all heresies, the synthesis of all heresies, and called modernism. And I think if any good Catholic would take time to investigate what modernism is. As a matter of fact, if I make a plug, I just heard the other day, I had a house guest here with me in Andalusia, Dr. Well, I call him Dr. K, Dr. Kwasniewski. He was here in Seville to give some talks and stayed with me for a couple of days. He was a marvelous guest. I just listened to his YouTube talk that he gave on modernism. It's a new talk. It's about 45 minutes long, but he does a very, very, very good job presenting it, how it started, what its development was, and how it is where we are today. This is the battleground. I've known this since I was 20 years old. I heard about it in Rome. I heard about it from a lot of people who were very concerned. They saw it raising its head again. It's about 150 years old, this heresy. But it didn't come to the battlefield until recently, until 60 years ago. Now, we had the council and everything. We've gone through the council and everything. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, deader. But here's the deal. The council caused a lot of confusion. There's no doubt about that. The council can also uncause that confusion. This is the good news. We've been talking about this since I was a student in Rome. Synods are created to deal with particular problems in the church. Now, if you have a particular problem, an ambiguity, how many times have you heard that word related to the Second Vatican Council? The council contains ambiguities. The documents can contain ambiguities. They do. There's no question that they do. And they've been misused. Now, what you do is you set up a series of synods to study these and then bring them back to heterodoxy. Bring them back to the real faith. That's all. You examine them, you report on them, you proclaim them, you clarify them. The clarification has not taken place. This is the problem. Now, while it's all not taking place or taking place in parts, there's all this division, and there is division. Anyone who says there is no division in the Catholic Church is living in Lulu land or La La land or somewhere. There's a lot of division. The point is this. Basically, we have to recognize, and this is the sine qua non. This is absolute. We have to recognize the validity of the Mass and the validity of our sacraments. The validity. When the priest says, "This is my body, this is my blood," it is the body and it is the blood of Christ. That's all there is to it. Whether it be the Novus Ordo, whether it be the Tridentine Mass that I celebrate every day, whether it be a Byzantine Mass, whether it be a Maronite Mass, any Mass that has these words, the words of consecration by a valid priest, ordained by a valid bishop, what have you, Christ is really, truly there. Now, I dislike what I see as sacrilege happening all over the church with the horrible liturgies, priests painting themselves up like clowns and jumping around and doing somersaults and mamas and idols, but this is outrageous, and I wouldn't attend any such thing ever. I would walk out on such a thing. However, as strongly as I feel about that, I would never say it is invalid. The sacrament is invalid. It is not. As a matter of fact, you'll pardon me for saying this, but that exactly is the problem, because it is valid. Therefore, it is. I consider it sacrilegious. If there was nothing happening there, who cares? There is something happening there. This is what we've got to recognize, and we cannot begin dividing ourselves. We can't do that. If we do that, the king of division has already won. Diaboline, we've been through this before, Robert. Diaboline, from the word diabolical comes, takes its root from the Greek, the two Greek words, to divide, to tear apart. This is exactly what Satan is. He's an expert in it, tearing apart, ripping apart, destroying, deunifying. You can't let him do that.
Okay.
And there is a way to remain united. There really is. What we need is, I've said it 1,001 times, we need a strong and holy Pope who has got to take charge of this situation and start remedying it.
Okay.
With synods, with talks, with understanding, with getting people together to understand, and also holding on to what is the truth. Now, I've said my piece.
Well, we're going to go to a break and have a video about your pilgrimage in October. We still have room for 2 or 3 more people. But before we leave, I wanted to react to what you said. What actually has emerged, and we're calling this the nightmare, is the feeling and the doubt that there's something that has been lost in the validity of the Mass, validity of the consecration of priests, the ordination, validity in the consecration of bishops, validity in the election and inauguration of popes. There is a widespread doubt that the church has been pushed into eclipse by the shadow, finally, of Satan working through modernists, working through Freemasons who have infiltrated the church and created the ape of the true church, and that we now are bereft in this period, which some say this was predicted, that this was prophesied, and that they must separate themselves from the visible structure of the present Roman Catholic Church. And this is a nightmare, and it leaves all sorts of questions about the baptisms that are performed, the first communions that are performed, and the ordinations that are performed throughout the church. And I want to address this question when we come back from our little publicity about our pilgrimage.
Come with us on a unique pilgrimage and retreat to renew your spirit. Experience the beauty and richness of southern Spain. Our retreat master, Father Charles T. Murr, a renowned Catholic priest, best-selling author, philosopher, theologian, trained psychologist, and pastor of souls. Father Murr will guide us through 3 mornings of spiritual reflections at a convent located in the historic heart of Carmona, Spain, promising a transformative journey. Experience an intimate evening with Father Murr at his home. Wine, dinner, music, and conversation, a highlight of this unique experience. Explore picturesque towns in Andalusia, each with its own history and charm. From the ancient streets of Carmona to the majestic beauty of Cordoba, the breathtaking views of Ronda, the remarkable village of Centenil, and the historic wonders of Seville. Our pilgrimage will be filled with awe-inspiring moments. Join us on this profound spiritual journey and rediscover the joy of faith, fellowship, and renewal. Book your place now and embark on a pilgrimage and retreat unlike any other.
All right, welcome back. I hope someone joins us in October in Spain with Father Murr. Father Murr, we've now touched maybe what we call the third rail. We can hardly touch it without being electrocuted. I must say both of us knew Cardinal Gagnon. He was asked to research in the 1970s whether Freemasons or other agents of non-Catholic spirit had entered into the Vatican and into the church. He did prepare a study. That study has never
And his answer was yes. And his answer was yes.
All right. His answer was yes. Cardinal Ratzinger, before he became Pope, in a meeting with me, said Freemasonry wishes the end of the visible Roman Catholic Church, faithful to Christ. They might be content with a church that appeared to be carrying on, but that had lost the fundamental unity. And I was astonished. I actually almost had goosebumps in that conversation.
That's right. He spoke quite clearly about Ratzinger spoke quite clearly about the Freemasonic influence in the church.
Yeah.
He lived with it. He knew it.
Okay, and so as we study his life, his election, and perhaps not certain in 2005 who was going to be chosen, and then as his resignation came in 2013, and then the final 10 more years of his life, we had thought he might pass away in a few months because he was so tired that he resigned, but he lived 10 more years. And he did reflect on the essential matters. But what has now crept in is the thought that we may perhaps have lost the thread. And there are people who are saying quite openly, we must wipe the dust of our feet from the old conciliar church and return to the tradition. And sometimes I myself am wondering what the precise path, because I had days of conversation with Archbishop Vigano, now excommunicated, but he, who had been a faithful servant of the church for decades, came to the conclusion that both doctrinally and also morally, with certain terrible sins and abuses, that the church had somehow taken an unprecedented departure. So, how do we face this crisis, this nightmare? You were telling me before.
Well, let me say this. Let me start right where you end off with the last question about Archbishop Vigano, whom I respect very much. I respect him very much. I respect his opinion. I think he's a pretty brilliant man. There's one thing where I disagree with him. I find it impossible to say that a general council of the Catholic Church called, to which over 2,500, perhaps 2,800 Catholic bishops from all around the world participated in and all signed their name to, is invalid. I'm sorry, I can't go there. Whether I like many of the things that the council taught or opened up, that's independent. I cannot call the entire thing invalid. Can't do that. And I don't know how anyone can do that. I'll go back to what I was saying before. There are many problems with the council. Many problems. Because many people used the council, formulated the council, used it as a vehicle to push through their own agendas, which were quite liberal. That's the problem. And those ambiguities, let's call them diplomatically speaking, those ambiguities continue today. They've not been addressed. 60 years later, they have not been addressed. They have to be addressed, and they can be. This is what's so crazy about the whole thing. They can quite easily be addressed. People have refused to address. They're afraid. I don't know what they're afraid of, but they refuse to clarify. They refuse to get down to giving an answer, and so they've left everything up in the air. Of course, there's confusion. Of course, you've got priests who are acting like dinglings. I see some of these videos. I can't believe this. These are priests, educated, doing somersaults, painting themselves like clowns, dressing up as puppets. It's insanity. And what it is a total lack of training to begin with. A total lack of training. I don't think they have any idea what they're doing. I mean that. A total lack of training. I can't go there. I can't go into the individual conscience of each man, but I wonder if there's any prayer life going on. Is there any connection to the intimate life of prayer with God? I don't know. There's a lot of confusion. What has not happened in 60 years, what has not happened is any clarification, any real clarification. John Paul II, to some degree, tried to clarify this. No women priests. No this, no that. No, okay. But he's just touching it was very superficial. Everything is superficial. And nothing was written in stone. This is the problem. So it really doesn't go to justify anything. Everything he said can be unsaid. That's the problem. Now, what I was suggesting before are synods, for an example, to answer the specific ambiguities of the council, to get an answer. We need answers before we're going to progress anywhere. We have to know where we're walking toward, rather than running away from. You can't do it. However, to say that all of these things are invalid, the new mass is invalid, and new bishops are invalid, you can't do that, or we're lost. We're lost. We had periods in the church, I don't know if people are familiar with this, but around before and after the Protestant revolt, we had popes taking both sides. One pope would say this, another one would come along and say that, back and forth, back and forth. This is nothing new. This is nothing new. What's new today is the rapidity of communication. We know exactly what's being said immediately, and we don't really have a moment to filter things when we're on to the next thing. That's kind of a problem. However, this is not new. One pope contradicts the other pope in teaching that is not fundamental. We're not talking about morals and dogma. We have this back and forth going on. It will be settled. I keep telling people it will be settled, but you mustn't leave the church. Avoid what you don't like. Avoid what. Look, if you go to a Novus Ordo Mass and you've got 3 chimpanzees and a circus going on, walk out. I have. I know a number of people just walk out. Well, I haven't fulfilled my Sunday obligation. No, and you wouldn't fulfill it there either. You wouldn't fulfill it there either. You'd be so full of angst that you wouldn't be able to participate in what they liberally call a mass. Leave. There are other ways of fulfilling in an emergency. You're traveling, you can't get to church. There are other ways of fulfilling your Sunday obligation. Say the rosary, read the readings of the day, take time to meditate, to pray during Sunday. Don't work, all of these things. Do it as well as you can under these emergency situations. Let me go back to another thing too, Robert. I know I'm a little bit on a roll, but permit me this. In the 2 years that we had no masses in the United States and elsewhere in the Catholic world, for this incredible hoax that was foisted upon us.
Yes, I agree with you.
I was one of the few priests in our area who said daily mass, had people there, brought communion to the sick, to the dying. I pretended nothing was happening that was extraordinary, because it wasn't. And I'm going to tell you something else, not because I'm so holy, because I'm not, but I would have considered it a privilege to die from COVID, taking people Holy Communion and the last rites. To me, that would have been, what a way to go out. What a way for a priest to go out. It would be magnificent. I would love it. So I had no fear of any of this. It was nonsense to me. I just continued plugging on. You just keep going. You do what you can do with what you've got. But so many people called me from distance that they couldn't get to Mass. I said, well, then take a missal, read the first part of the Mass, read the readings, spend some quiet time, do the rosary in the afternoon if you can, and don't work on Sundays until you can get to Mass. You're not obliged because the obligation, this is a problem with the bishops and everything else. You do what you can do. Well, people, they took solace in that. And so did I. This is what we've got to do. But you can't say that everything is invalid. Because when you do, Robert, here you get into a logical question.
Yeah.
Who's going to elect the next pope if all the cardinals are corrupt?
Yeah.
Who's going to make the new bishops? Continue. You can't do that.
Yes.
And just believe me, there have been times in the life of the church when there was more corruption than today, believe me. Really,
Yes.
truly, there was.
Yes.
We'll get through it. We will get through it. But you don't get through it by abandoning the family. You don't do it that way. When your brother's got a problem, your mother's got a problem, your father's got, you stick together. You try to find a solution. You don't say, well, the heck with everybody. See you later. You don't do that. Now I've spoken my piece.
Well, your piece is getting us close to a conclusion, which is not to abandon the church. And I must say for myself personally, I do feel very strongly the arguments made by even the sedevacantists, and certainly by the critics of the new liturgy, and by Archbishop Vigano, who is my friend. And
Robert, let me just permit me just a second. So do I.
Right.
So do I.
But
I could never go back right now to saying the Novus Ordo Mass. It has no taste to me. It's valid. I'm not saying it's not, but it's void of deeper meaning, of deeper recollection. The Trinity Mass means everything to me now, but I'm not going to say that the Novus Ordo is invalid. I can't do that.
Okay. So
that's what I'm saying.
So my first point is agreement that we're in a crisis. My second point is further agreement.
Yes.
That there have been terrible times in the past, that there were difficulties in the 1500s when the Protestant Reformation was convulsing Europe and there were wars and people died in the wars by the millions. If we count from about 1520 to 1648, the wars of religion. And then there was the 300s when they lamented that Arianism had become predominant, the Arian teaching about the nature of Jesus. And the world groaned, according to St. Jerome. And Athanasius, we say, contra mundum, against the world. He stood alone.
It's something else you should inject with that, Robert. During the Arian heresy, there were riots, mass riots of people, thousands of people killing each other over the question of Christ's divinity. I mean, this is incredible, but it actually happened in Byzantium.
So, since we know these things, there's several points I would like to talk for 2 hours, and my mind actually has lost track of the thread a little bit, but there's 3 points I can make. First, we go into the council, which you say had 2,500 or 2,800 bishops. They had all been consecrated bishops prior to 1962, prior to the change in the liturgy. 90% of them prior to 1958, because only the last bishop to have been made a bishop by Pope Pius XII in 1958 was Karl Wojtyła. Did you know that? No. Okay, that's an interesting fact. So Karl Wojtyła was legitimately consecrated a bishop by Pius XII, the very last bishop he consecrated. Okay. Now, but what I'm saying is, if that council had all these bishops consecrated from the 50s, from the 40s, and from the 30s, how can we understand those who say it was a false council, it was a heretical council? Okay, we can understand that there were ambiguities. That we know. They wove together between the conservative group, which was about 650 bishops, and the more, we might call them more modern-oriented bishops who thought that the church needed in some way to do what John the 23rd said, open the windows so that modern man, with all the changes that occurred after the Second World War and modern technology, modern communications, can be preached to by the church. Many bishops agreed that was necessary. So they wove together different statements inside of the 16 documents of the council, which need to be interpreted carefully and explained. This is why I very much want to make the point that Joseph Ratzinger, who was there at the council as a peritus, as an aide to Cardinal Frings, he spent the rest of his life interpreting the council in various phases And when he resigned, he gave a talk to the priests of Rome without notes. He stood there in the Paul VI audience hall and went for almost 2 hours saying there were two councils. That was his sort of final teaching as Pope. He said there was the council of the, as it was, and the council of the journalists and of the spinners who said this is a revolution in the church. There's no longer the old hidebound Catholic Church, but a new hip Catholic Church. And he said, therefore, we must return to the concept of the church being part of our tradition, read the council back into the tradition, and we'll be okay. That's the message he gave to us.
And that's the message that I'm trying to say now. Because without doing that, without doing what Ratzinger was calling for, we are going to fall into heresy. We're falling into heresy.
Well,
because no one is clarifying where we should be, and we must be as Catholics.
Well, it would even be a heresy to say the council was illegitimate, because we have a teaching that a council of the church called by the Pope, and although this leads to some people will go and say John was not legitimate already then, but the danger here is, well, what?
You have a problem with Mother Pasqualina, and I talked about that problem of John's legitimacy. He was legitimate. She didn't like him particularly, but he was legitimate. There's no question of that. You don't have to like somebody or not like somebody to qualify his or her legitimacy.
Okay,
he's legitimate.
So I do think there's a lot that can be studied about who influenced the council, who was paid, who paid the airfare.
Yes,
I think there were governments involved. Certainly the U.S. government was interested in what the Catholic Church might do to assist the Pax Americana, and the Soviets were interested, and there were influences. But this is part of history. We must stay with the church.
Part of humanity. Yep.
Yeah, to engage in the great task of reinterpreting the council back into the tradition. And therefore, what we have in front of us is an enormous task, because the best men we have to do that are right now on the edge or beyond the edge of condemning the entire visible church today. This is creating a huge problem, because
Robert, this is what happens when you are not on time to do things. This is what happens when you push things off and you don't want to look at them. We have not been looking at this seriously for 60 years, Robert.
Right.
And this is what happens. This is what happens.
Okay, so we now have this Robert Prevost. His name is Robert, like my own. I've met him. I recently shook his hand. I've been following him these 100 days. He's been Pope just 102 days. So he left Castel Gandolfo last night at 8 o'clock, about 8:40, I think. And in the morning, he went out to the ancient Marian shrine, Mentorella, the same shrine that John Paul II went to on the day that he entered into the conclave. He was almost late getting to the conclave because the car that he drove wouldn't start. And he had to ask a bus driver, please take me down to the village where I can get on a bus to Rome.
Take me down to the council.
He got to the council, I believe, just 20 or 30 minutes before the doors would have closed. And if the bus driver hadn't driven him to the bus stop at a very high rate of speed, he would have missed the council and he wouldn't have been elected. But what he was on his knees in front of the Virgin Mary at Mentorella, and Pope Leo just went back there. I think Pope Leo has spent these 100 days trying to establish the fact that he's a man of Christian faith who believes, and he also is a man who cares deeply about people who are suffering, as the very, very poor people of Peru. And you've been in Mexico. You see how people can suffer tremendously.
I've seen a little bit of suffering, yes. Yeah.
And charity, Christian charity, the love of Christ urges us, it says in Scripture, to be charitable to those who are in his image. So this is the social gospel. However, we do have this theological doctrinal problem, which Archbishop Vigano has been hammering away at, which is forgetting Christ, forgetting the sacraments of the church, which are directed towards weaving us into Christ. That's the whole purpose. And the enemies of the church would be very happy if the very smartest and most thoughtful and studious of us will completely abandon the church, and then
That's right.
they may.
Correct.
Mhm. And so
You're absolutely correct.
I think we need them, and I think we need them coming to visit you at Monte Cristo. But inside of the documents of Vatican II, I can also say there was an effort intentionally made to reach out to the Protestants. And in the liturgy,
Undoubtedly.
but part of this effort is not wrong. Part of this effort is deep within the classical Orthodox Catholic tradition, which was also expressed by Newman when he converted, but then reached out, but he was rejected by all of his Anglican friends. So, yes, we have the tragedy of the split with the Orthodox, 1054, East-West, and the tragedy of the split with the Protestants, 1517, North-South, Europe in the North, mostly Protestant, in the South, Catholic. We would love to overcome these. The Council wished to lay the basis for overcoming them, but in proposals, in suggestions, they didn't change teaching, or we can interpret it as no change in teaching, but the offering of an olive branch to say, if you would consider things in this light, you might draw closer to the Roman Catholic Church. And that somehow...
I agree, Robert. That would have been nice, but that's not exactly what happened, is it?
No. So we need a new strategy now to finally fulfill a kind of nightmare of confusion and of distortion and of, I would say, betrayal of the doctrinal tradition of the church, but to do it in a spirit of charity in such a way that we don't become an Ayatollah church or a fanatical church, but a church animated by the love of Christ. So somehow in these next coming years, this is what I hope to help initiate, which is the reform of the reform, which is the return of tradition, which is the reopening of bridges to men of goodwill in the Orthodox and Protestant world, and the recovery of that deep unity which we were so happy to have in the pre-conciliar period in the Roman Catholic Church. How's that?
Yes. I think that's well said. I think it's well said. And let me just conclude by saying this. And it is still possible. It is still possible. We need a pope. We've got to have the central figure in the church, the authority between earth and heaven. That authority that Christ left in the apostle and the successor of St. Peter. We need him to take the bull by the horns and make this happen. It can happen, and it can happen very beautifully if it's correctly done. The ambiguity can go away, clarification can return, we can become one church. It may take another 50 years for that to happen, but it can happen. It can happen. And I believe it is the will of God that it does.
All right, so we have our task. I appreciate all of our viewers. We don't have much time. We don't have much strength, but the vision is the restoration of the beautiful and finally necessary presence of Christ in our lives and in our world through his mystical body, the church, to keep the church strong and faithful, holy, and charitable. And I think this is the vision that will eventually gather strength in the months and years ahead. And I think Pope Leo will try, against many great difficulties, I think he will try to take this path.
Hope so. I hope so. I pray for that to happen. I would really like to see something like this happen before I die. I'd like to see it on this side of the Great Divide. I really would. I'll see it on the other side, I think. I hope, anyway. But I'd really like to see it in my lifetime. I've seen the devastation. We've lived through the devastation. We've lived through the tears and sorrows of all of this, of the havoc that's been released. It's time. I would like to die seeing something positive happening to the church. I believe the new Pope would like to see that too. I hope he would. I hope he would.
Thank you, Father Murr.
I'm going to go.
All right.
God bless you, and let's keep each other, all of us, in prayer, okay? For these and all the good intentions, Holy Mother Church. Maybe they be the will of God.
Thank you, Father.
Fox.
Come with us on a unique pilgrimage and retreat to renew your spirit. Experience the beauty and richness of southern Spain. Our retreat master, Father Charles T. Murr, a renowned Catholic priest, best-selling author, philosopher, theologian, trained psychologist, and pastor of souls. Father Murr will guide us through 3 mornings of spiritual reflections at a convent located in the historic heart of Carmona, Spain, promising a transformative journey. Experience an intimate evening with Father Murr at his home. Wine, dinner, music, and conversation, a highlight of this unique experience. Explore picturesque towns in Andalusia, each with its own history and charm. From the ancient streets of Carmona to the majestic beauty of Cordoba, the breathtaking views of Ronda, the remarkable village of Centenil, and the historic wonders of Seville. Our pilgrimage will be filled with awe-inspiring moments. Join us on this profound spiritual journey and rediscover the joy of faith, fellowship, and renewal. Book your place now and embark on a pilgrimage and retreat unlike any other.